Hello, here we are to continue our discussion of Phaser and JavaScript in general. And in our last discussion, we kind of worked through some of the docs and we tried to figure out this particle thing. I kind of played with the numbers here and got some settings that I think are in the ballpark for what I want to do in the game. And along the way, I had to look up a couple things. These properties here, they take these are the possible values. So it can take a number, it can take an array, it can take an emitter op on emit callback, or an object. And they don't really show you what the parameters are, the possible parameters here. So I kind of did some searching on the internet, and I found this post right here, scaling particle emitters, adding them to a container, right? And as I was reading through this, this was the first set of particle, or the first particle system that we did. This is how we did it, is we created an emitter and then we set properties on that emitter. And that's the same thing as putting in the configuration here. So if you set the X and Y, you're really just setting the position. If you set a speed property in the object here, you're just doing a set speed, right? So that's okay. And then I was looking at this, and this guy's showing some particles here that get smaller over time. Here they're kind of the same size, right? And what they did was they took the speed X and the speed Y, and instead of just putting a number here, they put an object with properties. So the problem I have here is it doesn't tell me what the possible properties are, right? Which is not very helpful. But here, this was really good, right? It's like, oh, I can put in minimum or max. I also noticed on scale, we could put in start, end. And I saw another example that showed alpha, and you could have a min, a max, and a start and an end on alpha. So when I played with this, I'm going to comment this line out right here, and then run the code. And this is what we have here, where the particles are not scaling. So they're just the same size, and they just kind of disappear when they get to the end. If I did alpha and I said start with an alpha of 1 and end with an alpha of 0, you'll see now that the particles kind of fade out as they move away. And so they just kind of fade away. So I think this might be useful for making a better effect, right? I'm going to comment this one out and uncomment the scale. So the scale has a start of 1 and an end of 0, right? So scale is like how big the particles are. And I think you could probably scale them on the X and Y separately, but it makes sense most likely to scale them proportionally, right? But now you can see that they just get smaller as they move outward from the center. So I think that's kind of a nice effect there. So between these two, I think I can make a pretty good effect, and then the rest of this will help too, right? So anyway, so let's get started, right? Let's get back to our code, and this is going to be a pretty long block of code here. So what I think we need to do is we need to figure out like where that's going to go in here, right? So, oh yeah, and we'll need a particle. So you can use anything for a particle, like any image. So the bomb could be a particle, the dude could be a particle, the logo could be a particle, this particle image could be a particle. I think I'm actually going to use the star. So when you hit a star, a bunch of little stars will pop out, right? Okay, so this will be my particle image. And I think you can also set the angle. Yeah, so we can do an angle. Let's actually experiment with that one right now. So what if we do, angle and make it, actually, I guess we won't be able to see it because these particles are round, right? Shoot. So I guess we can't really test that one. We'll have to test it in our own code. So, so anyway, let's continue working on our particles here, right? So I'm going to go to the code here. And I've got this config object for my game. I probably should have called it game config, right? That would have been a little more easy to understand. Or you know what I mean? If you had to read it, if you had to come back and read it later. What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to make a brand new file and say export default, and then I'll just define an object in here. And I'll call this like particle config. Okay, .js. and I'll put this in my source directory here with the other files. Like maybe I want to organize those in some folders later, but I've only got 5 files in there now, so maybe it's not a big deal. So anyway, so I've got my particles here, and I need to include some information. So let's go back to our internet sample code here, and let's see what we got. So I'll need to use some of this stuff. My particles don't have a frame because they're not built with a sprite sheet, but they may have an X and a Y, a speed, a lifespan, so it may have all this stuff. So let me add all that in now. So I think, actually, I don't even think I'll need the X and Y, but I'll put it in for now. Let's make it like 400 and Y, because I'll want them to emit at the position of a star. So I'll want to have to set the position, right? So we'll say speed of 200, lifespan of 500, blend mode of add. I remember they had this on phaser.blend mode, so maybe we want to get it from there later. But for right now, we'll just stick with this, right? Let's see. I'll leave frequency off. Max particles. This sets the maximum number of particles that you can have on the screen, right? So let's just make that 50. We'll go back and play with these numbers later, right? What else do we need here? Oh yeah, I think we need scale, and then this is going to have a start of 1 and an end of 0. I think that's going to be important to getting the effect to look right. So, so that looks pretty good. I need a trailing comma here, and it says something about the missing semicolon. I'm not even going to worry about that. So great. So now I've got my particle config, and now I'll need to configure the particles, right? So if I remember up here, I need to create the particles, from some image, right? So that'll happen in game scene, right? So I'm going to go in here, and actually I'll want to import my particle config. So I'm going to say import particle config from, and then I'll say particle config, right? Is that spelled right? Yeah, it looks pretty good. So so I'll get the particle config here, and then when I create my system, I've got a bunch of methods here, and then I've kind of created all the text here. I should really move this into a function, but maybe I'll do that later. So I'll say create particles, right? And maybe I'll just put this one at the top here. So I'll say create particles, right? And then here's where we'll create our particles, right? So so we got to make a variable. Why don't we say this dot particles equals this dot add particles, and then the image we're going to use is going to be the star. Okay, and maybe we can change that later, but I think that's what I'm going to plan to do, is just to use the star, right? Let me move this over just a little bit here. Okay, great. So now we need to make an emitter. So let's say this dot emitter. I probably need a better name, right? So I'm on to, I've done this line here. Now I'm on to this line. Maybe I need a better name, because maybe I'll have like several emitters, like one for stars, like when you collect a star, and one when you get hit by a bomb. So I might need like a star emitter and a bomb emitter, but right now we'll just say this dot emitter, right? And what we want to do is we want to say, this dot particles dot create emitter. Okay, and remember, we're going to pass in, like I've got this object. We could put this whole object in here, but just to keep things organized, I put it in this other file over here. So what we'll do is we'll just put the particle particle config object here. Okay? So let's save that and see how our game is looking here. Right? Oh yeah, hey, there's our stars. That's looking pretty good, right? Okay, now they're emitting all the time, right? So if you remember, we had that active property, right? So let's go back to our particle config and let's say active equals false, right? I need to put a comma there and a semicolon down here, right? And now when I refresh the game, hey, wait, maybe I thought it was active. Let me go check the property name here, right? Let me go back to all of those property names. I kind of lost that. Oh, emitter config. So let's go here and, oh, active. Wait, did I spell that right? Oh, it said, for some reason it put count active. Let me save that, right? I typed active and then it code hinted me. Okay, great. So there's our particle, okay? And we're doing pretty good. There's one other thing though, right? In order to get the particles to show up at a location, I forget where I found this, but I had to actually look it up, okay? And there's a property called emit particle at, right? Or it's a method, right? So I'm going to go back to here, and this is create emitter, and I'm going to do find, what was it? Emit particle, I think it's like, yeah, emit particle at, right? So this is a method on the particle manager. So in other words, like when we're here and I've created this dot particles, right? I can call this dot particles dot emit particle at, and I can give it an X and a Y location and a count. So this is like where to emit the particles and then how many particles to emit. Okay, so X and Y coordinate from the particles, Y coordinate to emit particles from, the number of particles to release from each emitter, right? So, so let's give that a try, right? Let me copy the name here, right? So I'm going to copy that. And what I want to do is I've got my particles here, and I need to find down here, I've got create cursor, create stars, collect star. So this is where a star is collected, right? So this is like where the player, like, and we're calling, if you recall, we're calling collect star when there's a physics overlap between the player and the stars, right? So we said physics, add overlap, player and stars, and then this collect star handles that. And it gives us the player, it gives us the star, and then we did a bunch of stuff here, you know, to add to the score and to disable the star. So why don't we insert our code here? So I'm going to say, you know, this dot particles dot emit particle at, and I'm going to include the X and Y location. So what I want to do is I want to say star. Now remember, it's not going to be this star because it's the star that was passed in here as a parameter. So there's no this in front of it. It's the one here, right? So I'm going to say star.x, star.y, and then how many particles do I want to emit? Let's emit like 50, okay? So that should be like a one-time thing, like 50 particles at this location, and they should look like the setup that we had in the config, okay? Hopefully, let's give it a try, right? So I'm going to go over here. There's my game. I'm going to try and collect some stars. Oh, I have some problem there. What am I missing here? Well, I don't have any errors. That's good. Let's double check. Hey, when something doesn't work, go to the console. Hey, I don't have any errors in the console. So what am I missing here? What did I miss there? Let me double check here. So I got my particles, star there. What is missing? Let's go look. Maybe it's in our particle config. Let me go look at this. Maybe Maybe I got to change the config properties here. Let's see. I'm going to get rid of this max particles. Maybe that limits like how many particles can show. Let's try that out. Oh, something still is the problem. Let's see what else. Let me check here. Well, let me think about this for a minute. Maybe I made a mistake here. I did active, but I'm looking at my sample code and I see that I used on. I'm not quite sure what the difference is there. Oh, hey, that's looking pretty good. So wait, let's go look that up. So in my sample code, I didn't use active, I used on for some reason. When on is false, I guess the emitter is off, right? And then if I look at the particle sample code here, where's the properties for that thing? Let's do find, create, emitter. No, wait, I gotta go here, add. Sorry, I lost my page here. Let's go add. Yeah, where did I put that page with the particle emitter? I went add. Oh yeah, I gotta go to add particle. Find particle. Yeah, there we go, right? And then I need to get this particle config here. And there's active. Yeah, I'm kind of curious, Boolean on. Well, they're not really saying much, right? Anyway, so that seemed to be it. So if I put on here, then I can have the particles, they can be off while the game, when the game is not emitting particles, but when I collect a set of particles, then excuse me, then I can have them show. So anyway, so hopefully that's helpful to you guys. I'm kind of not really clear like what's going on there, but that's actually kind of an improvement to the game, right? And then here's your challenge is to add a particle to the bomb, right? So when you get hit by the bomb, we need some particles there. Maybe behind game over would be a cool spot too. Anyway, thanks for watching, and hopefully that helps you a little bit.